But yeah, welcome everyone. This is Central High School's Innovation Design Review. So for our initial process, we started with 3 weeks of brainstorm to kind of decide on our concrete plan, since we were deciding from like 3 overall ideas, and then we broke it down to 1. And we based our work group on an agile work group as suggested by our mentor. And we split into subgroups of user story, user experience, development, and research, which you'll be hearing from all today.
So we came up with two names, and we wanted to ask you guys in the chat, just type 1 to 3 words about what this name invokes and what it means to you. So we'll start off with activeful, and just 1 to 3 words on. Oh yeah, on what you feel about it. And also do the same for repose, which is our other name that we thought of.
We just got to figure out which one's which here. They're going all at once. The animation got lost in the sauce.
Yeah. All right, well, we can move on to the next slide if you guys are finished up. So for our user story, we wanted to focus on our problem, which we identified as, because of COVID, a lot of people are having trouble with staying awake, or sorry, with falling asleep while at the same time remaining active. So because of that, we wanted to create a yoga app that would help curate the user schedule and help them find optimal sleep and health. And we wanted to focus on a group. Our demographic we're focusing on is health conscious teenagers to young adults who are having mild to chronic sleep issues and are trying to achieve their best health. We wanted to also involve a sense of peer accountability with our app, because we found that a lot of apps, when you're doing online exercise, it's hard to have that sense of accountability that you'd have in person. And yeah, that's about it for our user story part.
So on the expenses side of business, we have the capex and opex. For the capital expenses are things like camera, equipment, and gears for the instructors. And on the opex side, we have things like annual certificate, annual cloud housing, marketing, etc. On the chart, you can see like the total capex and opex for the 3 months of January.
So our plan for marketing was to go in waves. We wish to target a new year approach. So we want to have our advertising kick up in late December and possibly even November. And note that our total net revenue that we've projected is before taxation and depreciation and also paying back investors. So that's why the figure might seem a little bit exaggerated at this time. And we're hoping to go for a monthly subscription-based approach, although because of the nature of our program, we still have the opportunity to go with advertising or data collection.
So for the user experience of our app, we're trying to direct users to more important content by having what's called a neomorphic style, which is when the shadows kind of highlight important parts of the app. So right now we have 3 pages done. We have the home page, which has some opening content, the yoga page, where you can select which yoga you want to do, and your profile, where you can view how much you've done and edit your profile. And right now we also have a dark mode, so that way if it's late at night, your eyes won't hurt going on the app.
Okay, so we use Canva to create the logo for the app, which you can see on the top right. We use feedback from the user story group to decide on the color scheme for the app. As for the four main icons, you can see at the bottom of the app pages, we use Figma, which is a browser-based UI/UX design application. On the right, you can see a possible loading screen idea we are working on currently that was created using Adobe Spark.
For the development side of things, we basically had one option. We decided to go with React Native, even though there's a bunch of ways you could develop apps. We decided that for the UX team to have it easier to design apps and to have the best performing app, the best tech framework to use was React Native. We also discovered our limitations and with Firebase. So Firebase is what we're using to power our backend. So it's things such as authentication and storing the yoga videos and yoga content. And then other things included using a synchronized environment with the team. So we decided using to organize our tasks using Kanban organizing structures. So Kanbans are basically, if you've heard of the tool Trello, that's how it uses the Kanban method. And we also discovered our delivery process, so our scalability and design. How scalable is our app? How efficient is the design? And what's the best route going? What's the best way we can make our prototype featureful without it being hollow and not having any support basis for the developer side. And lastly, we'll go over flaws. There are some flaws that we hit using that we hit during the development side, but they are easily fixable, and we're working our best to go over them.
Okay, so we plan on integrating yoga videos into the app, but before we decided which videos we're going to use, we did some research on possible yoga poses that are more helpful as far as helping people go to sleep or get a better night rest. And then we researched and looked up some videos that would be helpful. First, originally we tested the video out on ourselves, but then we figured that it would be a great idea to reach out to other people to try it out. So we created a survey for people to take where they will try out the video. They'll tell us they'll tell us how well they would rest at night usually, and then they will go through they will actually they will practice. I'm sorry, they will actually follow the yoga tutorial, and then afterwards, the very next day, they will fill out the survey telling us how well they slept at night. And this helps us get a better idea of which yoga videos we should add to the app so it can be as efficient as possible. And overall, the videos that we did pick actually had pretty pretty well received feedback. And we actually have the data here in the presentation. Next slide, please. So yes, in the first chart, the pie graph, we noticed that for the most part, people tend to struggle to fall asleep sometimes. And then we have a few exceptions where here we have a few exceptions, but overall, people don't really get that much rest at night. And then in the second graph, we receive overall positive results. And overall, we all think that the content is helpful.
Okay, thank you all for listening to Central's presentation. So you can unmute or put in the chat any questions, comments, or suggestions. And then anyone on the Central team, you can try and answer them if you want. And so yeah, does anyone have any?
Raphael, what were some of the problems or flaws that you ran into?
Okay, so one interesting flaw, and this flaw is actually like I was expecting this flaw. So when we tried to run when I tried to run the environment locally, I had a problem with Android Studio, and it couldn't like open up the Android simulator. So one of the problems we're going to work on is actually getting to run this on Android, but luckily it runs on iOS as Matthew illustrated. So that's just one of the problems we ran into.
What kind of feedback is most helpful for you guys right now?
For the yoga videos, we've gotten a lot of like individual comments, and those have been really helpful. We were kind of struggling with like what questions we wanted to ask on the survey, but we ended up with going with how much did you enjoy? Sorry, how did you sleep after doing your yoga? Nayla, is there anything else you wanted to add on that? Or Daniel, since you just got here?
Yeah, for the most part, we did have a bit of difficulty trying to come up with efficient questions, but overall, I think we actually had we did a pretty. I mean, I feel like we all had a smooth.
We wanted the data to be easy to analyze, so we didn't want a lot of open response questions. We wanted it to be mostly graphs and stuff that we could take into account a lot easier and see what people like the most and such.
Yeah, I think that was really smart. I think it's good to see that you're kind of testing the content. I think it's always good to see like, oh, this thing does kind of work the way that we hope that it would. I would think, I don't know if you guys are planning on doing more testing or not, but a couple things you might think about if you are is have like the same measure for the before than the after, so that you can say like, how well did you sleep the night before, and then how well did you sleep after doing the research, so you can show graphs that are like exactly equally comparable. Might be one thing to think about, or to have people say, use the app over time and see if they noticed like an accumulation of the benefit using it more than one night. You'd also mentioned there's a social aspect. So see if you could get people to text their friends and say, hey, I use this app. Do you want to try it? And, or like, I watched this video and it helped me sleep. Would you use it? And you could test a little, are people willing to share? And then are their friends listening to them and using the videos to also try and sleep? So those would be kind of, if you want to push that testing side a little bit further.
Yeah, and I know when we were sort of designing those questions, I kept pushing like how do we measure this? Like, how do you measure how good your sleep was? But it occurs to me now that that really doesn't matter. The question is whether the person feels that they slept better when using the app, right? Because you don't have to prove scientifically that this works. You have to sell it, right?
Yeah.
And so if your users wake up with the perception that your product has helped them, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, well, and sleep is a really tough thing. Like so much of it is in your head. So if you feel like you sleep better, you probably sleep better, or at least you feel better the next day.
And it's really the change that matters. What you go to the doctor and they say, what's your pain level? And you say 7, and everybody's 7 is different, but it doesn't matter. It's just compared to what you said last time is all that matters. So it's the same with how you perceive sleep.
Where are you guys in the process? Like, how finished is this?
So there's two sides to it. There's the front end and the back end. Front end is mostly done. We're probably about 80% done. So there's probably about a week left of work. And in the back end, it's kind of hard to tell because there's always errors that you can run into, but it seems like we're on a pretty good pace so far.
To add on to that, we're not really worried about backend because we've made like contingency plans in case there's errors and stuff. So with app development and any development, when you have strict timelines, you always have to have like a contingency plan. So what if this doesn't work and you can't get that done? Like you can't just, just say screw it and not do it. So we've considered the options that in case the back end doesn't work, we have a fallback plan. But I think the way the progress we made just yesterday or like just a couple of days ago has been crucial to our back end being ready by the deadline.
Nice. Would it be helpful to have kind of specific feedback on different aspects of the story? Yeah. Okay. So I just have a couple thoughts that I'm happy to share. So I thought the user story was really great. It might also be interesting to talk about like sometimes like share a story of a teenager using the app to say like, you know, so-and-so hasn't been sleeping. So he uses this app and then he watches a video and he goes to bed, you know, like kind of walking through a little bit of how this fits into someone's life. But I think it's very clear like what your value proposition is. And I think the research that you did around the yoga is really helpful. I love the idea of like the business, the marketing strategy, like around a new year. And it's interesting with teenagers, like the new school year is maybe, you know, September might be more important than January for teenagers as you're like getting back into a routine. So that might be something to think about. Can I see the UX piece of it again?
Yeah, sure. I'll present my screen.
And maybe if it's at all possible, if you guys are comfortable sharing a link to the Google slide deck.
Yeah, sure. I can put that in right now.
Great. Thanks, Maria.
I really like the dark mode, the thought that you guys gave to like, oh, people are looking at this before bed. So maybe we don't want this screen to be bright, I think is great. Teenagers do love dark mode. I don't understand dark mode, but I think I'm just too old for it. And I think I love your little the buttons on the bottom, the nav buttons. They're like very clear, and I like that there are very few of them. It looks like it would be easy for people to, you know, get from one piece of the app to another. I would say on each of the screens, it's not entirely clear just from looking at the UX, like what exactly you want someone to do on each screen. So like can you kind of walk me through how I would use each of those?
Yeah, sure. So you open to the page on the left. So this is kind of just like your screen where you can see a menu of different options. There's not really like much to actually do on this page. So basically the idea is this reminder section will have some texts of like, this person messaged you or you missed your yoga yesterday. And if you click it, it will bring you to that page. So that way it's a pretty clear way to get to there. This was just, we were looking for something to fill the space. This can always be changed later on. And here is kind of featuring the yoga on the front page. Mm-hmm. So every day when you come on, there's like fresh new stuff and new content on the app. And this way you can see it when you first come on. The second page for the yoga just has the pose of the day, bigger and possibly with more text. And then on the bottom half here, you can't really see it in the slideshow, but this is scrollable. So you scroll down, you can look through pictures of different poses. And when you click on them, it'll bring you to a page with the video and a description. And that's where you're going to view the yoga. And on the profile page, it just has some metadata about your profile, like how much time you've been on, how many people you're in contact with through the app. You can theoretically list your mood. And then the chart here displays like the amount of yoga you've done over time. And I think that could be helpful for users to kind of gauge how they've slept in comparison to how much yoga they've done. So they can kind of visually see that. Mm-hmm. And then you have the settings button where you can interact with the more like, I don't know, like the less interactable parts of the app, if that makes any sense. Like, yeah. And the preferences is just like your preferences for the app.
Could you elaborate like what you could customize under the preferences kind of setting or tab?
I think we were thinking possibly like making it permanently or not permanently dark mode. You could, maybe we could have it so you can select your favorite pose, or even, I guess it actually would be pretty easy to make it so they can change their color theme. So instead of this green, they can put another color, like their favorite color, and that way it's more personal to them.
How would one go about kind of sending like a friend request and stuff like that and becoming friends with another user on the app?
Okay, so for the friend requests and stuff, what we're thinking for the prototype is basically have a huge list of people that you could follow, since you could always change that, or you could click on a link that someone sent you with Firebase dynamic links, and the app could automatically add you in. That's just two ways we were thinking to do that.
And what would people do with their friends?
Well, there was one thing in the innovation challenge that was about peer accountability. So let's say it's really easy to ignore apps, obviously, because you can just shut them off or uninstall them. But if your friends start texting you, hey, are you progressing? Hey, are you doing this? Hey, are you, basically you keep each other in check.
What would be visible if you were to view someone else's profile, and what would be hidden?
I think you would probably see around the same amount of things that you see on your own profile. You'd see maybe their time on the app, how many friends they have, and their mood. And maybe you could see their graph, I'm not really sure. But you don't really need to see very much else to have someone else's profile.
Would there be any like profile privacy settings and stuff like that? Like maybe you'd want to like hide how much you've been like actually using the app or not, or something like that.
Yeah, that could always be added to the preferences.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. So basically, anything I'm saying this from a developer side, anything you put into the app and goes into our database, and all of that is pretty controllable in client side. So if you wanted to hide something, or if you wanted to show something that's in the database, you could do that in the app. So any future features that we might want to do, it's pretty easy, as long as your profile picture, your name, your mood, all of that is in the database.
I kind of want to suggest maybe two things to think about. So one is on that home screen, where the thing that like looks like it's a clock, I kind of want to be able to schedule myself to do yoga, like schedule a routine. And I don't know how hard that is from the development side. I know you don't have to develop everything that you show on the user experience, but I feel like there's a real opportunity to kind of leverage having this thing, like not just having a reminder in there, but to schedule something, and maybe to schedule something with a friend. So if I wanted to say, hey, Chuck, let's do yoga before bed, I could schedule that on the homepage. And then the other thing, per our earlier conversation, it would be super interesting to be able to have the map of yoga activity map to self-reported sleep patterns. So you could say, how did you sleep last night? And just have somebody click a button, and then you could start to compare, oh, you've been doing a lot of yoga and your sleeping is getting better. Or whenever you do these poses, your sleep gets better. And when you do those poses, your sleep gets worse, or something like that.
So for the first one, that should be doable. So I think adding like a scheduled sleep reminder is probably something that we can do. And it also takes up this space that's not really very necessary. The only thing, like we were thinking about actually doing the sleeping that you were talking about, the only issue is that when they don't go on the app, it's hard to like determine how much they did sleep, especially when there's no way to really do that if they're not actively on the app.
Can it not send a notification at pick a time every morning, and it just gives you a pop-up, hey, how was your sleep last night?
There's something called like push notifications. So you could, from like the back end, you could push out notifications at times you want. And then there's also like something scheduled. notifications that you could make like hard code into the app. So maybe perhaps every morning, yeah, it would like start bugging you if you have notifications on. Or if you want something more like customized, you could write a custom piece of code that in the back end it sees like let's say you haven't been doing your goals, it kind of reminds you to catch up on them.
One thing I noticed here is that the yoga tab appears to be focused on yoga, like on individual poses. And I think the videos that the yoga folks had been circulating are like a routine with multiple poses. And so I would just make sure that the dev folks and or user experience folks and the yoga research folks are on the same page about that.
I mean, that can always be changed on the front end. Like it's pretty easy to, instead of having it linked to a specific pose, maybe to like a set of poses or a routine, and it will just open to a playlist kind of. So that could always be added in.
All right, we are at 3:35. Are there any final thoughts for Central before we switch over and your SLAM's review?
I thought it was great. And I just had one comment about the financial analysis, which was great. You put lots of detail in. You may want to consider having an answer to the most common question that people ask is, how did you calculate your user base size? Which is what everyone will, if you have an investor that's going to ask a question about something financial, they're going to ask that. And you might, just because of this presentation, you might want to consider moving it after what it is that we're presenting you. Now, if it was really a pitch to a bunch of investors, you'd probably want to have that financial analysis up front. But it might make sense to say what it is that you're building and then talk about the finances. And you might want to take out significant digits, like, this pennies don't matter. It's really great.
Yeah, really great job.
This might be like a little not important, but I'm wondering, is the app like only functionable when the phone is entirely online? Like, is there any kind of offline portion that can work?
Okay, for that, so how the app works is you need online like connectivity, so it could retrieve stuff from the back end. But if you have anything like saved locally, so this is probably not going to be in the prototype because it's just like way too much to add in whatever time we have left. But let's say if you saw something yoga related and you wanted to save it to your phone, we could potentially in the future add a button that you could do that. But you have to consider that most of the like apps that have this feature have been developed by big companies for many years. So yeah.
And there's like a storage concern for that, because it's a lot easier on your phone to stream data from another source, like for video, than to download like high HD audio stuff. Like it's a lot of storage to download that too, which is potentially problematic.
All right, thank you so much.